Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
Innovative Thinker, episode number 450. Innovative Thinker. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black entrepreneur experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Our next guest is passionate about the opportunity that digital currency is for equitable wealth building and works to illuminate the path for investors to start safely investing in crypto. Welcome, Dr. Tonya Evans.
Thank you, Dr. Richards. It's absolutely a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and I look forward to amplifying the work and connecting with your audience.
Thank you. I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your business and your life?
I've had a very non-traditional life as a lawyer, as a law professor, and as a lifelong entrepreneur. I definitely have an entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial past. I come from parents. One is a retired surgeon and now state legislator. My father, Dr. Evans, and my mother is a retired patent attorney. So they were both quite scientific. I was the curious and creative and athletic child. And interestingly, although today I'm a full tenured professor at Penn State Dickinson Law School and also the owner of the Advantage Evans Academy, which helps to onboard investors and professionals into financial technology and digital assets. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But my path to where I am today, I'm in my 16th year of academia. Before that, I practiced law, first at Big Law, then in partnership with my mother, and then a solo practice before I started teaching for 10 years. I clerked in the Third Circuit with an amazing African-American judge, Judge Ted McKee. I graduated before that from Howard University School of Law, HU, I was the editor-in-chief of the Law Journal. My non-traditional path before that, because that's kind of checking all of the safety boxes and coloring inside the lines, I attended Northwestern University on a full tennis scholarship and played tennis professionally for 4 years before I went to law school. And during that time, always writing, creating, always had an entrepreneurial spirit, even when I was in the traditional lane of business. So I've always been a both and type of person when it comes to being an intrapreneur within an organization, but also an entrepreneur. I always believe that it's important to have your own digital real estate, your own identity, your own brand outside of traditional employment. And if you are full-time, that's not a problem at all, but always creating your own brand and identity outside, because oftentimes our employers are in love with us until they're not. And you always want to make sure that you have a soft place to fall and that you have your own place and space in the world so that you identify your worth, whether you're within an organization or outside. That's kind of the high note. And then the final point of where I am today is really pivoting my focus. I'm an intellectual property and technology lawyer by training, but technology changes every day, every minute of the day. And so I found myself in 2017 pivoting my focus from just intellectual property, trademarks, copyrights, business entity formation, asset management, protection, and leveraging to focus on what new technologies could offer in the way of opportunity, what some of the pitfalls were, but also the promise, particularly for African Americans in this new digital asset economy. And that led me to launch Advantage Evans Academy, really to protect, but also empower our community to enter digital assets safely, legally, and confidently. That led to me authoring the book, my latest book that came out in August of last year, which is Digital Money Demystified. And so I had to challenge my own assumptions and misinformation and disinformation around this economy so that I didn't miss opportunities while also not being taken advantage of. And so that is the person that you see before you today.
When you talk about your book, if someone's interested in purchasing the book, how can they get the book?
It's available wherever books are sold. I prefer to support independent booksellers, particularly those that are Black or woman owned. You can start your journey to learn more about Digital Money Demystified at digitalmoneydemystified.com. great resources, give you a good foundation to at least learn more. I often say my book is the book that you read before you invest, or if you've had a bad experience and you need to take a step back. There is no reward without risk, but we need prudent risk. We need to have an understanding of how the language of money and wealth and innovation is changing. It comes both in ebook and paperback. So it's widely accessible, it is affordable, and it is your first stop on your journey to learn from someone who's not selling you a token or a coin or a project. I come at this as an educator, and so that is the first step on your journey.
And what is something we as consumers don't know about digital money, digital currency that we should know?
I want to think about the nature of money more broadly, and it's something that even with all of my education and my background, since 2017, I had to take a step back and just understand my own relationship with money. What is money? What is the purpose of money? How it's different from assets and value? Because you can be a high income earner and still be one check away from broke is a joke. And the difference between, I know the way wealthy people move, they prefer not to have an income because it's taxed at a higher rate. So I took a step back but creating assets that actually go outside and earn more so that I could spend more time doing the things I want, having freedom of time, freedom of choice. And then the nature of money. Money is a social contract. It's an agreement that we all make in terms of the value. The US dollar has not been on the gold standard for decades. So it really is the full faith and credit of our government. And it has its own challenges, to be sure. You need to make sure that merchants have it, that enough within a community have the same thing and have the same understanding. And also that it is legal in the jurisdiction where you are. And I use that kind of as a background of the different ways that we engage in trade. Think even before of printed money, when we had shells and salt and sugar, the horrendous scourge of enslavement using peoples and people's bodies. There have been many ways to represent value and to engage in trade over the millennia. And this is the next version. By this, I mean digital money that is secured by a technology called cryptography. When you hear the crypto and cryptocurrency, I think that's even like a scary word. But cryptography has been around for a long time, even before the digital age. And it just means having a message that is encrypted in one place and transferring that safely to another person, another entity, another organization, so that they can unencrypt it and read the message. Oftentimes used in war, and when you think of the Underground Railroad, you had to get information from one place to another. Cryptography is a way of making sure when we are exchanging money that is digital on a peer-to-peer basis. You may remember at the end of the 90s, we had peer-to-peer technology and people were using it to exchange. IP lawyers, it was a lot of copyright infringement, but let's go with it. Exchanging media files, right? Without having to go through an intermediary. I could have a peer-to-peer app and I could send you my favorite Beyonce track and I would still have the original, but you would now have it. You and maybe 1,000 of your closest or not so closest friends. That might have been great for music, not so great for money. But using the same technology, but making sure that it is secure is the reason that cryptocurrencies are actually more secure than the money that we're using now. And that's something that we don't see on the headlines. What we see is the opportunists that come into a space and take advantage of people who don't know. So educating ourselves is most important. Our money is digital right now. I'm traveling as we have our conversation, and the only time I really touch cash is when I'm tipping, right? To put a little something extra in someone's hand. My direct deposit is electronic. When I'm wiring funds, it's electronic. When I'm paying my tithes through Venmo, my church takes Venmo. I'm not touching physical money. My money is digitally moving from my digital record to someone else's. And that's the same thing with cryptocurrency. It's just not controlled by a government, but it's also not illegal in the United States as well. Final point, that if you paid attention to your 1040 as you were filing your taxes, the top third, before you even talk about your dependents, asks you a few things. One, your name or your business entity, the address, and whether or not you have received cryptocurrencies in some form or fashion. That was before your dependents. So it's also recognized by the United States. They would like their taxes. There's some underreporting and non-reporting in the space because of the way it digitally moves. But We now have electronic ETFs or electronic traded funds with Bitcoin. We will have them with Ethereum, another cryptocurrency. I've said this, all of this to give you the landscape of why we should care, why we must learn about this new type of digital money, and also that it's taxed as a capital asset. So not only can we use it for currency, but also as an asset in the same way that we think about real estate, and you must have it. The same way we think about stocks and bonds, you must have those. In the same way we think about intellectual property ownership in businesses, we must do that. But that what we've done traditionally is not enough. And this is a new way to do business, to accumulate wealth without those intermediaries that have systemically marginalized over time.
Let's talk about statements you had made when you were saying when you move like wealthy individuals and they don't really want income because they're taxed more. And someone is listening to that and saying, how do I manage, or how do I move, or what do I need to do to ensure that I'm moving like the wealthy?
Great question. We often think that the goal is to be out of debt. And I'll use myself as an example. Come up as a Gen Xer, told to get an excellent education. I did that. Told to buy a home, get insurance, and max out my 401k or 403b in my case now. And I guess we just write it out, get a burial plot, right? All of those things. And we check those boxes, become, my first job after my clerkship. It was a 6-figure job, basically, essentially right out of law school. But because income, the minute that it's in our hands or in our wallets, in our bank accounts, particularly we could talk about it in this age where inflation, you might rent an apartment. It's the same apartment. Arguably, it's not the same apartment because it's not brand spanking new, but the price to rent continues to go up. But you're in a place that's not as good as the first day that you moved in. Inflationary impact and I think the corporate impact of shrinkflation, right? Same packaging, a lot less inside. People often look to the government and say, oh, these prices are terrible. I believe in big business. I love assets. So that's not an attack. It's just a reality of for-profit entities, particularly if they're publicly traded, doing the most to get them, extracting the most value. That is based on an asset that doesn't just exist and the moment it's in your hand, it goes away, but something that builds over time with respect to capital gains. So the difference between someone making 6 figures, you basically can pay all your bills. I feel like being middle class means you have the availability of credit, so that now you have a new albatross around your neck that you will never dig yourself out of credit card debt or believing in the American dream without really fully appreciating the American reality of what it means to be a consumer instead of an investor. So there's but regardless of your particular age, stage, level, getting very clear about how to use debt to your advantage, taking on debt in order to acquire assets that actually will not only pay that debt, but also afford you some upside in terms of capital gains. The fact that if you hold capital assets for a certain period, they're taxed at a much lower rate, but income tax is just very high. And you could be a great 6-figure earner, but not feel like it, particularly in this area. So that's not the type of freedom, when we're talking about money and crypto assets, it's really not about them. It's about freedom. How can I put myself in a position to have the freedom of time, the freedom of choice? I'm currently on leave from the law school, for example. Had a conversation with my dean and said, I really want to write this book. And I'm really exhausted after teaching and I was an associate dean at my former law school. And my deanship basically started when the pandemic started. And I was exhausted, and I had the freedom of choice to say, I want to remain connected to my law school. I need to go take a nap in the south of France, and I need to write this book and get myself together. And she's like, okay, we'll see you when you get back. Now they're not going to pay you all the time to eat, drink, and be merry around the world. But I had the option of choice because I was able to use some of the assets that I had to give myself space so that I could be creative, so that I could create the new opportunities that would allow me to have that life, not just for me, but for my parents and for my godchildren and all of that. So when I'm talking about moving like the wealthy, it's understanding fundamentally that money is not the scarce resource, it's time. And anytime I'm trading my time for money, I am losing. Anytime that my rent and or my mortgages in my case, or my ability to take a vacation, to take a breath, anytime those things are dependent upon me showing up somewhere, I am not winning. Now, that is a step sometimes, or to be able to balance it out. But the idea and the focus of true wealth as a mindset is having the creativity of assets and opportunities that have a return on investment that actually go out into the world and work harder than you do so you don't have to.
Someone is listening and saying, that sounds so simple. I have a lot of time and little money. And when you talk about balancing that, especially as African Americans, drop some value bombs in what we should do. And I know that that's a very loaded question. And especially I want you to speak for the diverse emerging entrepreneur that access to capital and trying to stay afloat. What advice would you give them?
It's starting to look for new opportunities in a new economy where most people are not having this conversation. When I think about how wealth has been acquired, particularly in the United States, really on the backs of free and cheap labor, for being honest, and deciding on what side of the coin you're going to be. I'm not here on this earth to extract value from people without having some ethical and fair exchange, but I also don't want to be the product or adding value to another company without having requisite value for me. Thinking about what are the new opportunities. When I think about the land grab early on, where the best times, I love real estate, and it's one of those finite things. There's only so much land, and unless you have a volcano or something and a new landmass comes up, we have the land that we have, which makes real estate always my favorite thing, in addition to Bitcoin. We'll get to that. But when I think about land grab, and that was largely not only individuals, but in concert with governments to give out these land patents. And oftentimes, except for the limited period of Reconstruction, we did not have access to that. When I think of like the GI Bill or all these other opportunities that were not afforded intentionally, those were some of the ways that people started to acquire wealth early. It makes me think of the industrial boom when it was new. It's dirty, it's volatile, it's unregulated, and eventually it matures. But there was a lot of opportunity early on. It makes me think of the digital, well, even before the digital age, when I think about the computer age that then led to the internet.com boom and bust and reorganization. It was the Wild West. We still use those terms because we get it from the original land grab. It's the new Wild West. It was on the internet. We had all these .coms. It was erratic. It was nascent. It was emerging. We weren't sure how to regulate it, but eventually it matured into the Web 2.0, with which we're most familiar in terms of like the creator economy. It wasn't just us being the recipient of information, but we could exchange information, then we could create, then we monetize, get to the digital age, the mobile age. People were in the front, ahead of the game there. A lot of times that happens in Silicon Valley, where by the time some company goes public, it's been around 10 years. And those early investors, they saw the opportunity early when people said bad, scam, drug money, like all the same things that they're saying about crypto now, they said about the internet. I remember famously Bryant Gumbel and Katie Couric on the Today Show talking about electronic mail, and they were trying to figure out what the @ symbol meant. And it seemed scary. It was a fad. It was a scam. It was only for illegal activity. And now look what we're doing with the internet. I say all that to say, looking for the opportunities in the next wave when other people are not looking, you need to have a first mover advantage. It's an interesting first mover advantage now because there aren't the traditional gatekeepers that would keep African Americans from participating. In fact, in Ariel Investments, Melody Hobson's company, Ariel Investments, does this Black investor survey. It's not exactly every year. I think the last one was in 2022, but on a regular cadence, and they do it in concert with, in partnership with Schwab. The last Black investor report or survey not only focused on our acquisition of stocks, but also this new Black crypto investor. Now, their conclusions are, don't do this, do stocks. And you always have to check the messenger. And I have a great deal of respect for Melody Hobson, but I also know that they're focused on getting people to invest in stocks, love stocks, have a lot of them. But what their statistics showed was that we as Black people over-index in crypto. Question was, why? Are we just being taken advantage of? Are we unsophisticated? Or have we found an opportunity to acquire capital assets without the traditional gatekeepers? That is my conclusion. Now we have to be careful. We have to be prudent. We have to learn so that we are far less likely to be taken advantage of. But in terms of the book, it's also to right-size the information. The number one currency used in illicit activity is the dollar. It is the global reserve currency. It is the preferred currency for criminals by a mile, by a landslide. Right-sizing that information to understand we need to be on the forefront of opportunity when most people are not doing this. There are opportunities to invest in crypto without specifically buying that asset. We have regulated products like exchange-traded funds. The first Bitcoin, the spot Bitcoin ETFs, there are 11 of them, including one issued by BlackRock. This is not financial advice. This is information for you in consultation with your financial advisor who may not know a lot about crypto. Let's just put that out there. I think they're equally afraid. You have an opportunity at a very low price to participate without all the risk. And we need to be a part of that. We need to be a part of the next evolution and revolution of money and assets so that 10 years from now, we look back and realize that, and this is final point, this is the long play. This is not something where you go in. I'm not a day trader. I'm not a swing trader on the crypto side. Do a little swing trading on the stock side. But the stock market goes to sleep. It goes to sleep at 4:30, goes to sleep on weekends, it goes to sleep on holidays. Crypto does not sleep. It's a global economy, 24/7, 365. So this is a long play. It's a small part of an overall portfolio strategy. This is the way the wealthy are moving. Banks have moved into the space. The government has figured out how to regulate. And we really need to push past the sensationalized headlines to understand the truth, to separate fact from fiction so that we can make some power moves in this new digital economy.
I want you to have a monologue and I want you to name this person, living or not. And they have inspired you so much. Who is that person and what are you saying to that person?
It's interesting. It makes me think of Robert Smith or maybe like Don Peebles. When I think of those who started out not with 10 steps ahead of everyone, but in one generation, has not only changed the lives of their family exponentially, but also really changed the world, changed what was possible, believes very much in giving back and in the circulation of the dollar and lifting as we climb. These are not just platitudes. We have people, it makes me think of Sheila Johnson. I recently had the great fortune of sharing a stage with her at Your First Million Live, produced by Arlen Hamilton, who also has the book Your First Million out now and is a co-forward author for my book, Digital Money Demystified. These people, and let's focus on Miss Johnson, she fundamentally took nothing, then had something, then had to completely reimagine her life after BET and divorce and all of that to do what she's doing now. And I think of the luxury hotel chains and really continuing to move forward and to lift people up and share that experience. When I look back over my life, when people look back over my life, I want them to say that she did that I did the same thing, and really to thank those who are on the front lines. We think of generationally how much we've accomplished in a short period of time in spite of, and to see those shining examples in our community means it's possible, that they've changed the concept of what's possible in one generation. And so that really inspires me. And so if they were sitting here, I'd be telling them that as well, because we're watching and we're learning and we're taking notes and taking that into the new economy as well. I'm reading a book now that 10X is easier or better than 2X. And when we focus on 10X instead of incremental change, which kind of aligns with the question you asked earlier, focusing on the 10X means that the 2X things, the incremental things, the things we've always done to keep getting what we've always received, they fall away because we have to be singularly focused on what will take me today to a 10X experience. Moving the space physically, mentally, spiritually of those 2X experiences that keep you stuck, that keep you rich, broke, to really move into the next stratosphere is possible when we declutter our experience so that we get very, very clear about first mover advantage. And so those are things I've been thinking about as I kind of reimagine my own life. in this latest season of my life.
And when we talk about investing in cryptocurrency, and I hear you correctly, education is key. And someone's saying, what is the minimum start investing?
I love this question because oftentimes when people see the price of Bitcoin, we've had our recent new all-time high of 74,000 per coin, which is amazing for those of us who were even earlier, but that kind of scratches the surface of what some estimates are over the next decade to 20 years. But you don't have to have $74,000 or $60,000. You can literally start with $1. You can buy fractional parts of a coin or token. There are a few tokens that are all or none, but we have the all or none thought because of the rough comparison to stocks, right? Unless I have a mutual fund or something like that, usually it's all or none. You need to trade in whole parts. There are companies not endorsed by Cash App, but I use it a lot in my own academy when we're onboarding folks. Use something that you already trust. You don't even have to set up something new. I love Coinbase is a new but trusted partner in the economy. It's the first publicly traded company in the crypto space. But Cash App, PayPal, these are places where you can actually buy Bitcoin. And you can do that for $1, for $5. If there's a minimum, it's because the company sets it. It's not because of Bitcoin or the nature of it. I like to do the same way when I'm personally buying stocks. I'm dollar cost averaging. Over time, kind of set it and forget it. It's the same amount of money. Something that if I could spend $50 or $100 on a dinner or something like that that's here today and gone today, then maybe having one less of those in a month or in a week and allocating that to regular dollar cost averaging purchases at whatever makes sense for you. Most people treat this asset class, if they're focused on how this fits into an overall portfolio. I'm heavier in it because I've been in it a long time, but most people focus on like 2 to 5%. So that causes you, particularly anytime you have an emerging asset class and you are assessing the volatility, it's more volatile now than it will be 10 years from now. But I have a masterclass coming up and I do them relatively regularly. I don't know when people will be listening in the future or watching in the future here. So you should go to advantageevans.com and look for the next opportunity for a free masterclass. But in one of them, I talk about, I do an overlay of the historical charts for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's been around since January of 2009, which is a fun fact I think most people don't know. I did an overlay of that with the S&P 500, the New York Stock Exchange, the Dow, and maybe the NASDAQ as well. They all start the same. They all start and it's rough and tumble, right? You're looking at it and they basically all look like an EKG chart of someone who is not doing well. But over time, when you look historically, it's up and to the right. As long as my assets are moving up and to the right, I'm happy. Any given day, you could have a market drop, a market shift, quote unquote market crash, which has its own specific definition. But over time, as those industries or indices matured and markets matured, stabilized, become more predictable. But the real money is in the volatility. Actually, there's opportunity in volatility. So learning what that looks like and then assessing if my Bitcoin is down and I'm in it 2 to 5%, what do I need to counterbalance that? Do I need bonds? Do I need other things? So this is a play in an overall portfolio strategy, because when something's up, something's down. But you don't want to have it's true today as it was the first time someone says don't have all your eggs in one basket, but do have a diversity of eggs, have a diversity of baskets, right? Have a diversity of produce. I mean, we could take this analogy a long way, but I like to, and even within an asset class, we talk from a stock portfolio, maybe you have some large caps, you have some mid caps, even within industry and within investment strategies, you have diversity. Start small, start slowly, start is what I would absolutely encourage people to do at whatever level makes sense for you.
Dr. Evans, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I'd like you to ask the question and answer it.
It makes me think, we talk a lot about investors and investor strategies. I also love to talk about professional opportunities in the new economy as well. And I've been focusing on my own brethren and sisterin who are lawyers in particular who are looking to make sense of this new digital asset economy. As an intellectual property lawyer, there's so many interesting intellectual property issues at the intersection of blockchain technology, which is really just a digital record of transactions and balances, but it can also be used in supply chain. It can also be used in the provenance of goods. I've seen it used with fine wines or diamonds or other types of products and projects. I've seen it used in real estate. Even if you never invest a dollar directly in crypto, and I hope that you will take a second look and think of, reflect on your choices, or even if you never invest in the companies that are investing in the space, which is a really smart play, in my humble opinion, while you're learning on the space. Think of the professional opportunities of being a first mover. Do a quick search on your favorite search engine at the intersection of what your current area of expertise is. For me, it'd be law, education, etc., and blockchain and crypto, and see what projects are going on in the space. It won't take you long to be the smartest person in the room. There are not a lot of people focusing on this. It will allow you to make choices to move at that pivotal inflection point where, Blockbuster didn't evolve and Netflix came on the scene. And the next thing you know, none of us were going to Blockbuster to get our videos anymore. It happened that quickly. They kind of knew it was coming. They thought that they had the privilege of not paying attention to this new upstart. And the next thing they knew, they were out of business. That is, the world, as a matter of technology and finance, will change more in the next 2 years than it did in the past 10. And if you don't believe me, think about all the things that we're talking about this year about artificial intelligence. Literally months ago, no one was talking about this. And that doesn't mean that the technology wasn't around. And when it happens, things happen so much more quickly because we are connected by the internet. Professionally, there are a lot of opportunities to have a first mover advantage and to at least be aware of how you need to pivot with purpose in this new economy. So that is something I would offer to your audience as well.
We normally do a rapid round of fun and we have a hard stop, and I want to respect that. So with that being said, before we let you go, Dr. Evans, give our audience the best way, all your social media handles for them to connect with you and do business with you.
Excellent. So the best website is advantageevans.com to learn more about my book, the master classes, online courses. I have a summer cohort that will be running soon for professionals and also for those investors who are looking to power up their portfolio. So we have a Power Up series every summer, power up your portfolio and power up your profession. And lastly, to learn more about the book specifically and to order, your first stop could be digitalmoneydemystified.com. That's digitalmoneydemystified.com.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.